Disclaimer. A young woman goes on a first date with a man she barely knows. Hours later, her car is found torched behind an abandoned building. Days later, a stranger walking along Lake Michigan spots something impossible to unsee: a human leg lying in the rocks. There is no crime scene, no weapon, and no obvious suspect, just a missing 19-year-old and a detective staring at a beach asking herself where the rest of her is. This is the story of Sade Robinson, a college student, a hard worker, a devoted big sister, whose life was cut short after a date that should have ended with a text to a friend and a good night's sleep, and instead became one of the most disturbing homicide investigations Milwaukee has seen in years. Before we get into it, if you love true crime cases built from digital breadcrumbs, security footage, and painstaking detective work, the kind of investigation where every tiny detail matters, go ahead and hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Now, let's get into it. Our story begins on April 1st, 2024, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Sade Robinson was 19 years old, a full-time student at a local technical college, just weeks away from earning her associate's degree in criminal justice. She worked 2 jobs to support herself, serving at a country club alongside her younger sister Adriana, and working shifts at a local restaurant called Pizza Shuttle, where her former boss remembers her as someone customers and co-workers loved almost instantly, someone who greeted him with the same cheerful joke nearly every shift. Sade had built an independent life entirely on her own effort. She rented her own apartment, bought her own car, and was, according to her sister, determined to give both of them a better future. She had already started meeting with military recruiters, hoping to enlist in the Air Force after graduation. She was, by every account from the people who loved her, exactly the kind of young woman who had her whole future carefully mapped out in front of her. The night before she disappeared, Sade and Adriana worked a shift together, then drove to their grandparents' house for Easter dinner. Adriana would later describe it as one of the best nights they had shared in a long time. Warm, easy, full of laughter. When Sade dropped her sister off afterward, there was a small, strange pause between them. A different kind of hesitation neither of them could explain at the time, but one Adriana has never forgotten since. The next morning, April 1st, Sade FaceTimed her mother, Sheena Scarborough. She looked happy, glowing, completely at ease, and mentioned nothing about any plans for that evening. She left for her shift at Pizza Shuttle around 9 a.m., captured on her apartment's security cameras walking out the door in the same outfit she had chosen that morning, an outfit that would later become one of the most important pieces of evidence in this entire case. After finishing work around 5 p.m., Sade exchanged text messages with a man she had met only days earlier, arranging where they would meet for their date that evening. His name was Maxwell Anderson. The two settled on a restaurant called The Twisted Fisherman. Security cameras there captured the two of them together, and to anyone watching that footage later, something about the dynamic felt off almost immediately. Anderson spent much of the evening chatting with the bartender rather than engaging with his date, barely turning to look at her, barely making conversation, an oddly disconnected energy for what was supposed to be a first date between 2 people getting to know each other. Around 6:30 p.m., they left together and made their way to a second bar, Duke's on Water, where surveillance footage shows the 2 of them playing beer pong with another couple. For a brief stretch of the night, Sade appears to be genuinely enjoying herself, smiling, relaxed, having fun. It would be the last time anyone captured her looking that way. Around 9 p.m., the 2 left the bar together, walking normally, showing no signs of impairment, and got into Sade's car. Using data pulled later from a location tracking app on her phone called Life 360, investigators would determine that Sade arrived at Maxwell Anderson's house around 9:30 p.m. For the next 3 hours, her phone remained there. Then, at roughly 12:30 a.m., her phone left the house. But instead of heading home, her car began driving in circles through Milwaukee for hours, captured on scattered surveillance cameras around the city, windows fogged from the inside, moving with no discernible pattern or destination. At 2:53 a.m., her phone's location finally settled at a rocky, wooded stretch of lakefront known as Warnemont Park. a place investigators would later learn held a very specific significance to Maxwell Anderson. Minutes later, the battery on Sade's phone died. She would never be seen alive again. The following day, April 2nd, a young man walking through Warnemont Park with a friend made a discovery that would launch one of the most methodical homicide investigations in recent Wisconsin history: a single human leg lying among the rocks near the shoreline. Lead Detective Joe Donner of the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office arrived at the scene knowing almost immediately she was looking at a homicide, but with almost nothing else to go on: no weapon, no clear crime scene, and, at that point, not even a confirmed identity for the victim. What Donner did not yet know was that roughly 3 miles from where that leg was discovered, Sade's own car was already sitting behind an abandoned building, burned beyond recognition. And what Donner could not have predicted was just how much digital evidence, a location tracking app, restaurant security cameras, a neighbor's home surveillance system, would end up reconstructing, almost minute by minute, the final hours of Sade Robinson's life. We follow the investigation as it races to identify the victim, uncover the horrifying clues hidden inside Sade's burned car, and confront a mother's worst fear before a single piece of DNA evidence ever comes back. By the morning of April 2nd, 2024, Detective Joe Donner had a body part, a location, and almost nothing else. No weapon at the scene. No obvious crime scene beyond the single grim discovery along the shoreline. And crucially, no confirmed identity for the victim. But working alongside Milwaukee Police Detective Nora Donegan, Donner already had a name circling in the back of her mind: a 19-year-old woman named Sade Robinson, who had gone out on a date the night before and never made it home. The connection strengthened quickly once investigators located Sade's car, found abandoned behind an empty building roughly 3 miles from her apartment, deliberately set on fire. The damage was severe enough to destroy nearly any DNA or fingerprint evidence that might have remained inside, and fire investigators quickly determined the blaze had been intentionally set, detecting the distinct smell of a petroleum-based accelerant on the passenger side of the vehicle. But fire, it turns out, does not destroy everything. Investigators searching the wreckage found Sade's purse still tucked beneath the driver's seat, a detail that immediately eliminated robbery as a motive. And inside the trunk, they made a discovery that turned their stomachs: Sade's pants, her underwear, her jacket, and her shoes, the exact outfit captured on her apartment security camera that same morning. Her jeans had been removed and turned inside out in a way that made clear someone else had taken them off of her. Detective Donner also noticed something subtle but significant about the car itself: the positioning of the driver's seat. Trained to read these small physical details, Donner tracked down an identical vehicle model at a local dealership and conducted a simple but revealing experiment. She had a deputy, roughly Sade's height, sit in the seat, positioned exactly as it had been found. The deputy could not reach the pedals without perching on the very edge of the cushion. Donner then had a taller detective sit in the same position, and based on that comparison, she concluded the last person to drive Sade's car had to be at least 6 feet tall. Sade herself was nowhere near that height. Someone else had been behind the wheel. The day after the remains were discovered, investigators reached out to Sade's mother, Sheena Scarborough. Sheena immediately called for Sade's 16-year-old sister, Adriana, to come home early from school, sensing something had gone terribly wrong before anyone had said the words out loud. When Adriana arrived, she found her mother's house already filled with an unmistakable, heavy dread. Investigators asked Adriana if Sade had any location-sharing apps on her phone. She did, an app called Life 360, which, unlike a simple Find My Phone feature, stores historical location data with remarkable precision using GPS. Adriana pulled up the app on her own phone and watched as it revealed something that made her stomach drop. Sade's phone had died at 4:35 a.m. at a park called Warnemont, a place with absolutely no connection to anything in Sade's normal life. The moment Adriana shared that detail with the detective standing in front of her, she watched his expression change entirely. And in that instant, she says, she knew. Sheena Scarborough would later describe the moment the same way, an immediate, gut-level certainty that someone had hurt her daughter. While the family waited for DNA confirmation, one small mercy remained. Technically, officially, nothing had been proven yet. But that fragile hope did not last. As investigators worked to trace the final hours of Sade's life, using the very same Life 360 data that had first raised alarm bells, the picture that emerged left almost no room for doubt. They obtained security footage from the Twisted Fisherman, the restaurant where Sade had met her date that evening, and later, footage from Duke's On Water, the second bar the couple visited. Piecing together this footage alongside the app's GPS trail, detectives were able to reconstruct nearly the entire evening, minute by minute, an approach that gave this investigation something increasingly rare in modern homicide cases, an almost complete digital shadow of a victim's final hours, capturing not just where she went, but who she was with the entire time. And the man captured beside her in nearly every frame of that footage had a name investigators were about to become very familiar with: Maxwell Anderson. At this stage of the investigation, Donner still needed more than mere proximity. Simply being the last person seen with someone is not, on its own, proof of murder. But as detectives began digging into Anderson's background, a much more troubling picture started to take shape. One involving a documented history of violence, a temper that had already surfaced in prior incidents, and perhaps most chillingly, a personal connection to the exact location where Sade's phone had gone dark in the middle of the night. To understand how investigators built their case against Maxwell Anderson, you first have to understand exactly who he was, and how quickly the picture painted by those closest to him diverged from the image he had presented to Sade during their brief courtship. Anderson was 33 years old, 6'1", working as a bartender at the very establishment where he and Sade had first crossed paths just days before her disappearance. According to the bar's owner, Sade had walked in that day looking for a job, and while there, she met Anderson behind the bar. The two exchanged phone numbers, and by the end of the encounter, Anderson had walked her to her car, a small, seemingly polite gesture that, on the surveillance footage detectives later reviewed, appeared to Detective Donner like a man trying hard to make a good impression on someone he hoped to see again. But the deeper investigators dug into Anderson's background, the more that polite first impression began to crack. He had served briefly in the Navy before receiving what Donner would later describe as a general discharge. He had built a career in the service industry and owned a home on Milwaukee's South Side. On paper, he looked like an ordinary functioning adult with a stable life. His criminal record told a different story. Anderson had a history that included charges for operating a vehicle while intoxicated, disorderly conduct, and, more troublingly, documented incidents of violence directed at his own family members. In 2019, he had been captured on video, filmed by a bystander, physically beating a man who had tried to intervene during an argument Anderson was having with a girlfriend at the time. He was arrested on a battery charge but ultimately pleaded guilty to a lesser offense. For Detective Donner, the pattern that emerged was unmistakable. A man with a documented temper and seemingly little concern over who ended up on the receiving end of it. Still, a troubling history is not the same as proof. Suspicion alone would not be enough to bring charges, and Donner knew it. She needed something concrete tying Anderson directly to Sade's disappearance, something beyond the fact that he had simply spent the evening with her. Using the same Life 360 location data that had already proven so valuable, investigators confirmed that Sade's car had traveled to Anderson's home the night she vanished. That was enough to secure a search warrant. On April 4th, just 3 days after Sade disappeared, Donner's team prepared to execute that warrant, carefully coordinating so that Anderson would not be home when they went inside, a standard precaution meant to keep everyone involved safe. When surveillance spotted Anderson unexpectedly heading back toward the house, the team made a split-second decision and took him into custody immediately. Officers on scene later told Donner they could physically feel him shaking as they made the arrest. Anderson requested a lawyer and was never formally interrogated. But when Donner's team finally entered his home, what they found was, in some ways, more unsettling than what they expected. There was no dramatic bloody crime scene. No obvious signs of a cleanup effort. It quickly became clear that wherever Sade's body had been dismembered, it had not happened inside that house. They did find something strange, an extraordinary number of knives scattered throughout the kitchen, 51 in total, though a careful examination determined that none of them appeared to have actually been used in connection with the crime. For Donner, the search left her with more questions than answers. No murder weapon recovered, no definitive crime scene identified, and no single piece of direct forensic evidence tying Anderson conclusively to what had happened to Sade. It was, by Donner's own admission, one of the more frustrating stretches of the entire investigation. Promising lead after promising lead, each one ultimately falling short of the hard proof she needed. She even found herself questioning the fundamentals of the case, briefly considering whether the remains recovered at Warnemont Park might not belong to Sade at all, and cross-checking missing persons databases just to be certain she was not chasing the wrong victim entirely. Meanwhile, more remains continued surfacing across the county in the days that followed, discoveries made not only by law enforcement, but by Sade's own devastated friends and family, who refused to simply wait on the sidelines. Two of Sade's family friends, frustrated by what felt like insufficient police presence in certain search areas, returned on their own to comb through wooded ground investigators had already covered. One of them found a blanket belonging to Sade. The next day, the other discovered a human bone near a set of train tracks, again, in an area officially already searched. It was a raw, painful illustration of just how desperate and personally invested Sade's community had become in bringing her home. Then came the break that would finally give Donner the missing piece connecting Anderson directly to the crime scene itself. A woman named Chloe Wright, who had dated Anderson for more than a year before their relationship ended, came forward, stunned to learn her former boyfriend was now a suspect in a murder this brutal. While Chloe insisted Anderson had never been physically violent toward her, she described a relationship marked by verbal cruelty, constant comments about her body and appearance. A toxic dynamic, she says, left lasting scars. But Chloe remembered something else, something Anderson had shared with her in confidence, a secluded, secret spot along the lake that he referred to, almost possessively, as his own private beach. He had taken her there once, giving her directions turn by turn, rather than the actual name of the location, explicitly telling her he did not want her bringing anyone else there if they ever broke up. When investigators asked Chloe to lead them there, retracing the same directions Anderson had once given her, she guided them directly to Warnemont Park. By April 12, 2024, Milwaukee County Sheriff Danita Ball stood before reporters and confirmed what investigators had feared from the very beginning. The severed leg discovered at Warnemont Park belonged to Sade Robinson. That same day, Maxwell Anderson was formally charged with first-degree intentional homicide, mutilation of a corpse, and arson. He pleaded not guilty to every count, and DNA testing would later confirm that all of the additional remains recovered across the county belonged to Sade as well. It would take more than a year for the case to finally reach trial. In May 2025, Maxwell Anderson's murder trial began, and Detective Donner, despite everything her team had uncovered, knew she was walking into a genuinely difficult fight. This was, by its very nature, a circumstantial case. There was no murder weapon, no confession, no single unmistakable piece of forensic proof placing Anderson's hands directly on Sade at the moment of her death. Donner has said openly that she desperately wanted one clear, undeniable piece of direct evidence, and that it simply never came. Prosecutor Ian Vance Curzon built his case methodically, walking the jury through the final hours of Sade's life almost minute by minute, using the same trail of security footage and location data that investigators had spent over a year assembling.
What Maxwell Anderson did to Sade Robinson was an intentional homicide. There is no question behind the intent, and there's no question about the person responsible for doing it. The killer is him. He's the last person to be with her, the last one texting her, the last one whose residence she was at, the last one who had her car, the last one who had her phone, the last one who was with her.
He argued plainly that Sade had been murdered by Maxwell Anderson, her body then dismembered in a brutal, deliberate manner. and that Anderson had gone on to attempt to erase her from existence entirely. Among the most chilling pieces of evidence presented was grainy footage captured by a neighbor's home security camera, showing Anderson and Sade arriving at his house that night, a light turning on in a second-floor window, followed by moving shadows visible through the glass for hours afterward. Then, footage showed only a single figure eventually leaving the house, a figure matching Anderson's 6-foot height, captured against the fence line outside. The defense, led by attorney Anthony Cotton, pushed back hard against the state's entirely circumstantial framework. Cotton did not dispute the basic timeline that Sade and Anderson had gone on their date and returned to his house together, but he argued forcefully that shared time together proved nothing about what happened afterward. He dismissed hours of surveillance footage as inconclusive, arguing that while cameras captured Sade's car moving through the city that night, nothing definitively proved who was actually behind the wheel. He also highlighted what he called serious gaps in the prosecution's case, chiefly the absence of a confirmed murder weapon and an undetermined cause of death, since portions of Sade's remains, most critically her head, had never been recovered. The defense also introduced a jarring, uncomfortable detail, a safe discovered in Sade's own apartment, containing marijuana and pills that appeared to be methamphetamine, though those pills were never sent for conclusive lab testing. The implication seemed aimed at suggesting an alternate explanation for Sade's death entirely, one potentially connected to drugs rather than her date that night. Jurors, when later interviewed, described this attempt as an obvious and ultimately unsuccessful distraction, noting that toxicology testing on Sade's own remains had found nothing beyond ordinary caffeine. Throughout the trial, jurors were shown footage of a man seen leaving the area near Sade's burning car, a bystander's voice audible in the background identifying him in real time. That same figure was later seen boarding a city bus, this time captured clearly enough on camera to identify his face without question, Maxwell Anderson, still carrying a large backpack that, along with the pants and shoes visible in that footage, was never recovered by investigators. His jacket, however, was eventually found discarded in a neighbor's trash can, and when tested, it contained Sade's DNA inside the hood and on the zipper pull. Perhaps the most devastating piece of evidence came near the very end of the trial. Photographs recovered from Maxwell Anderson's own phone, images he had taken and later deleted, showing Sade at his home, face down, unresponsive, in a state investigators believed indicated she was already deceased. Jurors who later spoke about the case described this moment as the point where any lingering doubt in the room finally dissolved entirely, describing a heavy, stunned silence that fell over the jury room once they reconvened to deliberate. Anderson's defense ultimately rested without calling a single witness, and Anderson himself declined to testify. The jury deliberated for less than an hour before returning their verdict, guilty on every count, first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and arson. At Maxwell Anderson's sentencing, Sade Robinson's family finally had the chance to speak directly to the man who had taken her from them, and what followed was some of the rawest, most devastating testimony the courtroom had heard throughout the entire case. Sade's younger sister, Adriana, then just 17 years old, described how profoundly her sister's murder had reshaped her own life, explaining that she now moves through the world unable to meet anyone new without an underlying fear that they too might cause her harm, simply because all Sade had done was meet someone.
Most importantly, he stole Sade's chance to be an adult, to choose who she would and would not let into her life, to prioritize herself for the first time and do what makes her happy. As a result of his actions, I have had to grow up way faster than a 16-year-old should have to. I had to communicate with law enforcement, take care of my family, physically pick my mother up off of the ground, on top of trying to deal with my own loss, because he left them all too weak and broken to do anything.
She spoke of everything she had lost, not just a sister, but every future moment Sade would never get the chance to give her. Sade's father, Carlos Robinson, addressed the court with a raw, unfiltered grief, telling the judge that losing a child this way was almost impossible to comprehend, and that whatever punishment Anderson faced, in his eyes, could never fully match what he had done. Sheena Scarborough, wearing her daughter's favorite shade of pink, confronted Anderson directly, condemning the way he had scattered her daughter's remains across the city like something disposable. And then she made a plea that would come to define the lingering, unresolved pain at the center of this entire case. She asked him directly to finally reveal where the rest of her daughter could be found, specifically the one part of Sade that had never been recovered: her head.
But I'm going to respectfully request that you confess where the rest of my daughter's crown is, if you have any respect left for me and her father and her sister and the rest of my family in this community. You've already done the worst. You can at least give us that much.
She told him he had already done the worst imaginable thing, and that revealing that location was, at minimum, something he still owed her family. When the judge asked Anderson if he wished to speak, he offered condolences to Sade's family, but continued to insist he had not committed the crimes he had just been convicted of, expressing hope that future investigation would somehow prove his innocence. He offered no answers about the location of Sade's remains. The judge went on to read a prior statement Anderson had given investigators after his conviction, in which he claimed he regretted not walking Sade to her car that night, insisting he believed she had been abducted afterward by an unknown assailant either from an alley or from his own backyard, and claiming that his own presence near the location where her car was later burned had somehow been a setup. For Detective Donner, hearing this explanation offered no doubt whatsoever. Based on everything she had learned throughout the investigation, her own theory of what happened that night is that Anderson may have wanted to take things further than Sade was comfortable with once they returned to his home, that she rejected him, and that his documented, well-established temper took over from there. Donner has also said she believes this was very likely the first time Anderson had killed someone, but based on the calculated, methodical way he attempted to dispose of Sade's body afterward, she does not believe it would have been his last, had he not been caught. That chilling possibility gained even more weight through Chloe Wright, Anderson's ex-girlfriend, who revealed that almost exactly 1 year after their relationship ended, Anderson had reached out to her over social media with a brief, unsettling message suggesting a period of ignoring her was finally over. Just 5 hours after sending that message, Anderson met Sade Robinson for the very first time. Before delivering her sentence, Judge Laura Crivello paused to share her own reflection on the loss the community had suffered, describing Sade as exactly the kind of young woman she would hope every young person could aspire to be, someone who had been loved by nearly everyone whose life she touched. She then sentenced Maxwell Anderson to life in prison, with no possibility of extended supervision, ensuring he will never be released. In the aftermath, Sade's memory has continued to grow well beyond the courtroom. A mural now stands beneath the restaurant where she once worked, capturing the same warmth co-workers and customers remembered so vividly. Her mother has since launched a program in Sade's honor dedicated to supporting crime victims, and has partnered with a Wisconsin state representative to help create a task force focused specifically on addressing the disproportionately high rates of violence faced by Black women and girls. At what should have been Sade's own college graduation, her sister Adriana walked across that stage instead, dressed in a pink cap and gown, accepting the degree Sade had worked so hard to earn. Today, a memorial bench sits at Warnemont Park, the same shoreline where this entire investigation began and where Detective Donner has continued to return again and again, still hoping that one day the lake will finally give back the one part of Sade her family has never been able to lay to rest. Maxwell Anderson has since announced plans to appeal his conviction, but for Sade Robinson's family, the verdict already delivered one undeniable truth: that a young woman who simply went out on a first date, full of hope for everything still ahead of her, deserved so much more than the ending she was given. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the case of Sade Robinson. If this story kept you as hooked as it kept us while putting it together, make sure you are subscribed so you catch our next investigation the moment it drops.